Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of The Lion's Den. In today's episode, we speak with Sydney Rodman, the founder of Green Revival. Now, this was a pretty cool conversation for me because this whole space was sort of new for me. And that space is the bioeconomy. And so, Sydney taught me a little bit about the bioeconomy and how it's basically the set of businesses that reuse biological resources like crops that have gone unused or lumber or scrap wood or things like that that come from the land, and these companies reuse those products in order to create textiles or materials or medicine in some cases. So it's a really interesting part of the economy. And one of the very cool things that Sydney's doing with Green Revival is they're also trying to focus a little bit on invasive species. So not just crops that nobody's using, but also those invasive plant species that are doing harm to the environment. Can we remove those from the environment and then enter those into the bioeconomy? I think it's a really cool 2-for-1 sort of approach. And I think you're going to like the conversation.
Sydney, welcome to the Lion's Den.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Before we started recording, we were talking about some of the cool, crazy things that we like to do. And one of your hobbies is caving, which to me sounds kind of scary. Can you tell me about that? That is basically spelunking and rappelling through dark caves and finding your way in and out. Like, how did you get into that? What does that entail?
Yeah, so it depends on the cave. Some caves you can walk straight into, and some you do have to rappel into. There's different entrances. And it's really just exploring a place that not many people have gone, where there's no sound, no light, no smell, and just seeing a place that is really hard to access.
Is that so? It's interesting that because you didn't tell me that before we started recording, there's like the no sound, no smell thing. So is part of the allure of it like just being in this place where you're alone with your thoughts, kind of?
I think for some people, I like that, and so for me, a little bit, I like the exploration aspect and enjoying nature with other people and not being on my phone, and just pushing myself into somewhere. Like if I go through, like in between rocks, where does it take me?
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. I mean, that's, I have a couple, I guess one of my hobbies is like endurance, whatever. And so I'll go on really long open water swims. And I've lived in Hawaii, Caribbean. And I think the reason that I really enjoy that stuff is because I get to a place where I just kind of like look around and maybe pop my head up for a second, and it's just quiet and it's just me, and there's this beautiful view, but I've exhausted myself to get there. And it's like one of the only times that you can really just feel at peace. You can feel like awe, and it takes you away from your daily grind basically, which is crucial. Sounds like caving's the same.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we both love nature. We've established that. But you probably a little bit more than me, just based on your background. So you have a business called Green Revival. You're the CEO of Green Revival. Can you tell us a little bit about Green Revival? What is it that you all do?
Yeah, so I want to get into the story of how I founded Green Revival, how I came up with the idea. I was a conservation technician. I was weeding all summer in upstate New York in Lake George, but it was underwater. So I was scuba diving every day, removing an invasive plant called Eurasian water milfoil that was hurting one of the clearest lakes in the US, hurting the houses, the homeowners association, tourists, and also the animals and organisms that are living in that lake. And so every day we would just have bucketfuls of plant. And I wondered where it went, learned about where this company took it, but also across the US, the invasive plant problem. And so I created Green Revival to give plants a higher purpose and utilize them in industry. So within a 100-mile radius of a manufacturing of a bioeconomy product, we will vet, deliver, and then tell the story of the plant that is used to make a product.
Interesting. Okay, I have 1 million questions. So Um, let's maybe start at the beginning in that lake. So what does that plant look like? Is that like a algae kind of gloopy thing, or is it like a leafy kelp kind of thing? Is it on the surface of the water, the bottom of the lake? What is it?
So this plant, this aquatic invasive plant, is grown in the bottom of the lake. There are some that grow on the top, and you can see just a lake that you can't even drive a boat in. This
Hmm,
one is very long and has it. I mean, plants look so different underwater than it looks
true.
kind of like a fern. So just a very skinny root and then thin um, leaves. It's not really a
Hmm.
leaf, but it's just tiny pieces of the plant. And so these tiny pieces, if a piece comes off of the plant, then it could spread. So it's really hard to stop the spread. But if you remove it, that stops it for a little bit and mitigates the problem.
Okay. And how was this harming the net, like the native species in the lake?
Yeah, so it just grows uncontrollably and takes up space, blocks other plants from the sun. Um, it just changes the environment so that some fish can't navigate the waters anymore. It changes the chemical composition of the lake.
Okay. And then you also said it was harming the like homeowners association and the people who live there. Is it because it was making the lake uglier or killing the fish and so the fishing wasn't as good? Like what how was it
Yeah,
harming them?
everything. Um,
Okay.
and then also with the lake um, becoming uglier because of the plants, it hurts the tourism industry, and so the homeowners, um, it's harder for them to live in a beautiful place like Lake George when um, less tourists want to come.
Yeah. It's really crazy. So where do we know where that plant came from? Like how it got there? I guess
It
that's two questions.
Yeah, lots of invasive plants are spread through trade and then
Mhm.
also just gets on the bottom of a boat. So before getting in the water, there are inspections, but
Mm.
it's really hard to make sure that you're not spreading the tiniest piece of plant. And if it's not on the bottom, it could be inside the boat or inside your clothes or something that you're holding.
Got it.
But
Okay.
it's Eurasian, so it comes from the Eurasian region.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. So you're dealing with this plant and you're like, what are we going to do with this plant? We got buckets filled with this. And that was when you realized that there is this industry, I guess we'll call it, which was what did you call it? It was like bio.
The bioeconomy. So really anything made out of food is part of the bioeconomy, beer. Um, yeah.
Okay. And so I know that, so I guess there are companies out there that will, for example, when farms, harvest their crops and they go to sell all of that to grocery stores and whatever, they may have some ugly looking crops that they don't know what to do with. And so there's sort of like a supply chain of things that can happen for that ugly ear of corn, and how it can actually be used. Nobody would buy it from the grocery store, but we could do something with it.
Yeah. Actually, not only is it the ugly foods, and those are
Uh-huh.
sometimes resold, but it's also the part of the crop that isn't used. So you're using the corn, but what about the stalk?
Got it. Okay. And so that's just the farming piece of it. That's sort of like the bio waste, I guess, let's say, from farming. But then there's all this other bio waste, like what you were doing, cleaning up this plant, this invasive species. That seems like prime bio waste, invasive species. It's like we don't really want them to be where they are. Let's go use them for something else. So what are some uses for bio stuff in the bioeconomy?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tree species that are invasive. So any type of wood product, biochar is a big one. And then there's a lot of research being done and that has been done on the chemicals in certain plants and their medicinal properties. And then a lot of people use hemp to make physical materials like insulation or building construction materials. There's many other plants that can do the same thing.
Okay. What do you think the plant at the bottom of Lake George could be used for?
I don't know. That one, I mean, it has to be researched that aquatic plants could be used artisanally. There's a company in Nigeria that works with local Nigerians to create, that weave baskets and clothes out of aquatic plants.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot of land or terrestrial plants that, because they're drier, they're better to use. So I focus more on the dry plants, even though I got my spark from Green Revival underwater.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so I think this is my last question, based on what you told me about Green Revival. Is you mentioned like I think you said 100-mile radius. So it sounds like what you're trying to do, maybe I got that number wrong, but you're trying to basically, for those companies, those manufacturing plants within a 100-mile radius, you want them hopefully to be sourcing their biomaterials locally. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Tell me what else you know about the environment. This sounds like an awesome business that you have going, but like, was it just the scuba diving in Lake George that made you want to start this? It seems like there's got to be a little bit more to your story when it comes to the environment and solutions to help the environment and solve some of the environmental problems we're seeing.
Yeah. So I studied ecology and was a big biology nerd, but took the route more like environmental biology. And when you get into the environment, there is a lot of opposition. So really, every solution there's a dissenter, and it's good to have that criticism to make a solution better. But I think the amount of dissent for any solution is something that made me wonder if that was something that made progress slower.
All the dissent. Yeah. I mean, where do you wish that there wasn't dissent? Like where is there dissent right now that if it didn't exist, things could be moving in a more productive fashion? What are people getting wrong about how they're approaching the environment right now?
I really believe in market-based solutions to scale. So we know all these different problems. We have literature that not enough people read, but why should they? If they're not in the scientific community. So we know different solutions and problems, but how do we scale solutions? Business is a great way to do that. So I think the connection between market and conservation is something that was lacking. So I think just a default view in ecology and conservation, environmentalism, is to kind of use business as a scapegoat and actually hyper focus on business, which is a solution, which is really crazy. If there's all this focus on it, like why not use it? And then in more in the entrepreneurial world or business world, I think conservationists that will really do anything for an animal and sometimes look at animals above humans, think of, and there's a wide range of different views and debates in conservation, but I think they are viewed as radical and not practical and not valuing money. So yeah, I'm trying to be a bridge between the two and taking the good parts of each.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, and I think, I'm remembering part of what you said about Green Revival and what you all do is not just to, help those businesses to find the biomass in their area so that they can use it and put it to good use. But I think the end of that story was, or the end of your offering, is that you then help them tell the story of how they used that. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's because there's this big dialogue about greenwashing, and this is good dissent. Lots of companies will slap a label on and say sustainable or natural or net zero, but tracking that claim and understanding how each company is defining it is the Wild West. And I mean, it's good sometimes to market those benefits, but it's not fact-based right now, and it's not easily able to really understand. And so what's the best way to understand it is knowing where it comes from. Actually, I was at the Australian embassy yesterday, and it was a conversation about AI and elections and geopolitics. And something that was talked about it's called content provenance, so the origin of content. If you're changing a picture or video, or just creating something that goes viral and spreads misinformation, or leads someone to do something that they wouldn't have done without that post, where did it come from, and how can you track it down so that people can get accurate information? So we're doing the same thing with the supply chain.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, I forget what I was listening to the other day, but it was talking about, some of the greenwashing stuff that you're mentioning. And it was something like, World Economic Forum goals for, carbon reduction. And I think it was saying like the UK met their goal of reducing their like steel manufacturing, which reduced their like carbon output. But what they did to accomplish that was not produce any more steel and just procure it from India, which has way dirtier processes of steel production. So it's like on a global scale, did the carbon footprint really reduce? No. And so there's ways to kind of like gamify it that I guess just aren't helpful.
Right.
And so I when you talk about the businesses that you're helping, those businesses I think have like the easiest way of saying, hey, we actually are green. Like we literally look at what we do. We make something out of something that would otherwise be waste. And not only would it be waste, but some of it is also an invasive species that's harming everything around us. So we're sort of like solving multiple problems at once. And I think a lot of those companies, which based on what you're saying, it's like these, industrial, manufacturing burlap sacks out of hemp, or plastic out of some sort of farming material or whatever. Those are the kinds of companies that don't really do a lot of advertising or marketing or messaging. So you don't even really hear about them.
Yeah, sometimes it takes 8 companies to get a material to a consumer. So it's hard for a company to get attention, or like break through from just transacting business to business.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, tell me about, I was on your LinkedIn page, and I saw something on there about Colossal Biosciences. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So Colossal Biosciences is a biotechnology company with the goal in 2028 to bring back the woolly mammoth. One of their founders is the creator of CRISPR. So I actually got to visit one of their labs in March. So yeah, it's a very exciting company.
Are they going to bring back the woolly mammoth by using CRISPR to gene edit an elephant to be a mammoth again?
Yes, they're taking the closest related ancestor to the mammoth and then changing the genes to be as close to an extinct woolly mammoth, and then bringing it back. But in order to restore an ecosystem, you have to get rid of the invasive species to get it ready.
And what are the invasive species? Saber-toothed tigers? Those aren't here anymore.
So for the woolly mammoth, they want to bring it to the mammoth steppe out in Siberia. So I'm not sure what the invasive species are there. There's animals and plants. But really anywhere that we do restoration and species introduction, especially of an extinct species, the ecosystem has changed so much. Even if you're not bringing back a species, our ecosystems are changing due to invasive species and just other changes that affect the life. It's just things that are added into the system. So we have to change it to make it ready for a chance to the woolly mammoth to to sustain itself on that land, and for other animals to, even if they're not extinct or just if they're endangered, so that they can stay healthy and use their natural resources.
I think I saw a documentary about this. It was called Jurassic Park. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Isn't this kind of crazy trying to bring back the woolly mammoth?
Yeah.
Are there other species, extinct species, that are kind of like next on the list if you all were to accomplish the woolly mammoth? Like, where does the dodo bird fall on this list?
Yeah, so the woolly mammoth, dodo bird, and the thylacine are the 3 species that they are bringing back. But they also gene edit endangered species.
In what way? What do you mean?
So I think this was in Australia or New Zealand, somewhere far away. They took a type of toad that was on their population was declining because of an invasive species. So they edited their genes to be resistant to the chemical that was hurting them.
Interesting. Okay, so gene editing to stop the slow extinction of that endangered species. That is fascinating.
Yeah, it's very powerful technology. So there are many ways to do things wrong with it. So hopefully it'll all be good.
I was just thinking, I want my genes edited to be impervious to poison as well. That would be nice.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary about that too. That's called X-Men. So, okay, what if people want to reach out to you and talk about this stuff? I mean, who do you want to reach out to you, I guess, is the question. Are you looking for partners? Are you looking for customers of the biomaterials that you're trying to put to use? What are you looking for?
Any form of collaboration, whether that's a customer, if you're creating something out of biomass, if you have biomass waste, if you want to intern, or if you want to partner in any other way.
Awesome. Okay.
And
people
LinkedIn
can find
or my website, greenrevival.co, and filling out the contact form will get you in touch with me.
Okay. Perfect. LinkedIn or Green Revival website. We'll link to both of those in the notes. Sydney, anything else that we didn't talk about?
Nope.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I would love to talk more with you about all this stuff because it's a lot of it's over my head, but it's really cool. And I think if we can succeed at a lot of this stuff you're trying to do and just become a much more circular, greener, cleaner sort of economy, depend on business in order to make that happen, I think it's a winning recipe. So really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.